We talk a lot about bouncing back, but what if that's kind of the wrong way to think about resilience? What if the real secret isn't that you recover, but how you recover? We're about to dive into a pretty radical new idea about how systems handle stress. And our guide? Well, it's one of nature's most incredible superorganisms, the honeybee colony. So let's get into it. A healthy panic attack. I mean, that sounds like a total contradiction, right? But this question is the key that unlocks this entire theory. It suggests that for any complex system, whether it's a beehive, an economy, or even our own minds, the ability to have a strong but controlled and temporary panic, well, that might be the very definition of resilience. And this quote right here, it gets straight to the heart of it. It's not about just snapping back to the way things were before. No, it's about the process, the journey the hive takes to get there. We're looking at the response in motion, how that alarm bell rings, how the bees frantically reconfigure their whole social network, and, crucially, how they pull themselves back from the brink. It's the shape of that journey that matters. Okay, so first things first, we need a little mindset shift. We're not looking at 50,000 individual bees here. We need to see this as a single superorganism. When a predator attacks, the entire colony feels it and responds as one coherent being. It basically has a collective nervous system. So the big question becomes, what does a healthy nerve response actually look like for a superorganism under attack? The old way of thinking about this would be, just to count the casualties. But that totally misses the real story. The story isn't a number, it's a shape. It's hidden in the pattern of social connections. Who's talking to whom? How does that wave of alarm ripple through the network? And how does that network literally rewire itself on the fly? So this brings us to the two most important words you're going to hear: pattern and phase. Think of a pattern as a single photograph, a snapshot of the hive's social network in one frozen instant. But phase, well, that's the movie. It's how those patterns evolve from the initial shock through the chaos and into recovery. See, we're not just looking at photos. We have to analyze the entire film to understand what's going on. So how does this all build into a new way of thinking about resilience? Well, the core idea is that if we can measure this pattern phase response, a healthy hive should have a very specific, recognizable signature when it's under stress, a kind of fingerprint or shape of resilience. Now, this healthy signature has a bit of a technical name: pattern phase trauma resilience, or PPTR. But don't worry about that. Just think of it as a 4-point checklist for a healthy panic. Number 1, a strong, clear peak response. 2, the alarm is contained. It doesn't spread everywhere like wildfire. 3, it fizzles out pretty quickly. And 4, and this is really cool, the hive learns something, leaving a small trace of the event in its network. And this isn't just some vague concept. We can actually measure it. A healthy peak response means we see a 2 to 4 times increase in activity right after the shock. That's the sweet spot. It's strong enough to get everyone's attention and mobilize a defense, but not so strong that it shatters the whole system. And the panic has to be firewalled. That's feature number 2, limited spread. In a healthy, resilient hive, that intense alarm signal is contained to less than 30% of the bees, mostly the guards and foragers who are right on the front lines. This is brilliant because it protects the core of the hive, allowing the nurses to keep tending to the young, totally undisturbed by the chaos outside. So here's that phase, the movie, in action. A predator attacks. Within just 1 to 10 minutes, the alarm signal explodes to its peak. But here's the really critical part. Just 20 to 60 minutes later, the hive has already calmed itself down. The response is powerful, for sure, but it's temporary. It knows when to turn itself off. All right, let's put it all together. On the left, you've got the healthy response: strong, contained, brief, and the hive learns from it. But on the right, you've got a runaway panic. It infects the whole colony, it lasts for hours, and it actually leaves the network scarred. This is the crucial difference between a useful, adaptive alarm and a destructive, lasting trauma. Now, this all sounds pretty amazing, but it raises a huge question. How does a hive actually do this? How does it allow an alarm signal to be strong enough to work without letting it spiral completely out of control? Well, the theory proposes it's all about a series of gates. The theory lays out 4 types of these panic containment gates. First, you've got structural gates. The actual social layout of the hive acts like a firewall. Then there are chemical gates. The alarm signals themselves are designed to fade over time. The queen's influence is another gate. Her pheromones have this natural calming effect, and get this, even the hive's collective gut microbiome can act as a buffer against stress. Let's zoom in on that first gate, the structural one. A hive isn't just a random mob of bees, it's organized into these distinct social neighborhoods, or modules. You have the nurses, the foragers, the guards, and so on. An attack at the hive entrance might send the guards and foragers into an absolute frenzy, but the social connections between them and the nurses module are intentionally weaker. This design literally slows the spread of panic and shields the most critical part of the colony, the nursery. Okay, so this is a fascinating theory, but you might be wondering, is it just a nice story? Not at all. The real power of this whole framework is that it's actually designed to be tested in the real world. Let's take a look at how scientists are planning to do that. So the game plan has 3 basic stages. First, you just observe. You map out the natural shape of a hive's response to some kind of controlled shock. Second, you manipulate. You start breaking the gates on purpose. What happens to the response shape if you mess with the social structure or block a chemical signal? And finally, you translate. You take this whole model and see if you can find these same resilience shapes in totally different systems. And that is where this gets truly exciting. Because this was never just about bees. The ability to measure the geometric shape of a stress response could be a complete game changer for how we understand resilience in all kinds of complex networks. I mean, just think about the possibilities here. They are staggering. What if we could measure the shape of a brain's response to trauma to better diagnose PTSD? Or what if we could watch the shape of a stock market crash in real time to know if it's a contained little shock or a full-blown meltdown that's about to take down the whole system? From our own gut health to the way information flows on social media during a crisis, this way of thinking could apply everywhere. So ultimately, what this suggests is that resilience isn't really a feeling or some kind of moral virtue. It's a shape. It's a universal pattern written in the language of networks. And that leaves us with a final, pretty big question. What does the shape of resilience look like in your community, or even in your own life? And maybe more importantly, what gates do we need to build to make sure that when shocks do come, we don't just survive, we actually learn and grow stronger?